This is the Coaching Leader Podcast, a podcast about coaching, leadership, and leading through coaching. And here's your host, Scott Gress.
Welcome to the Coaching Leader Podcast, where we seek to make leadership development practical with the help of coaching. If you haven't yet, please check out lcmscoaching.com, an LCMS coaching network where you can learn about coaching, find a coach, and network with other coaches. And today we have the privilege of talking with a man who has worked in the business world, then became a pastor, and now for the past few years has been serving at the seminary in St. Louis, primarily as the Director of Resident Field Education. He's a great Christian man and pastor who's passionate about serving others and developing students and Christians. I know you'll be blessed.
Hi, I'm Scott Gress, and we're glad that you've tuned into the Coaching Leader. And today we're blessed to have Reverend Bill Wilson with us. Hi, Bill. How are you?
Good morning, Scott. Great to be with you.
Good to be with you, too. I've appreciated getting to know you a little bit in my trips to St. Louis and hearing a little bit about your story and your interest and involvement in the mission of the church and your faith and serving others, but also your interest about coaching. So I wonder if we could start off by you sharing a little bit about your journey, and let me kind of lead off, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong or correct me. You have a bachelor's in consumer science, and do you have a double major or a minor in agribusiness?
It's actually a major in agricultural business in both.
Okay.
The master is in professional agricultural business, so it's more of the practical side.
Yeah.
Master's. But
And then you also have an MBA, is correct?
well, that's the one in professional economic
Okay.
business, and then the MDiv.
Yeah, and then later on got a Master's of Divinity at Concordia Seminary, where you're serving now.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about your spiritual journey, because you're a little bit of a rare bird that you have that, extensive background and expertise in one area and now serving in ministry. But I'm sure that the first blesses the second. Is that right?
Well, that's very much so. I was involved in youth ministry right out of college, and then got involved with our district, and we did a couple mission plans. I was able to be trained to do prison ministry, so I was in a correctional facility. And of course, along the way, everyone's encouraging me to go to the seminary, go to the seminary, go to the seminary. And I was really involved in my community. So I was president of Lions Club, president of our country club, just really active in Chamber of Commerce, networking, just doing a lot of things. And then I did a lot of things with farmers to help network them and put them together in different projects, and sort of had one of those moments where I thought, I'm doing all this work, but there's really no spiritual value to what I'm doing. I mean, I could see the vocational part of what I was doing, but it was that end game, at what spiritual value or heavenly value, eternal value is there to what I'm doing. And I came home one night and I said to my wife, you know what I want to do? And she said, I know what you want to do. And from then it was, work on coming to Concordia Seminary, which happened in 1999.
Awesome. Yeah. And then from there, where did you spend your vicarage or
Well, that
internship?
was interesting. I was going to go back to Iowa District East and do a mission plant, but there was quite a turnaround of personnel in the Iowa District East. And so I got acquainted here in St. Louis, and Dr. Glenn Nielsen assigned me to his congregation, Timothy Lutheran Church here in St. Louis. And Pastor Ron Rawl was there, and the two Iowa boys, farm boys, we really clicked together as a team. And so I went back my fourth year and sort of was assisting the pastor. Then they called me to be the associate pastor. And I was there for 20 years.
Fantastic. I can't claim being a farm boy, but I was born in Mason City.
Well, that gets you into the rural area anyway, a little bit.
And I was baptized in Iowa West.
Right. Right.
Well, fantastic. So, and then what was the transition from parish ministry to Concordia Seminary?
Well, I retired in August of 2021 and really didn't know what I was going to do, but I wanted 6 months sort of sabbatical just to sort of regroup. And Tim Seleska, Professor Tim Seleska, he's Old Testament, but he's also the Dean of Students here at Concordia Seminary. He called me up about a month after I retired and said, I got the perfect job for you. And he said, we're looking for an interim residential field education director. And as it went through the process, it took exactly 6 months. I retired August 15th, and February 15th of 2022, I started at Concordia Seminary as the interim director of residential field education.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
And at the time, what was your understanding of, the purpose of resident field education? So as you went in, what were you anticipating?
Well, that was rather unique. See, I had 20 years of residential field education supervising.
Sure.
And so
Yeah,
I was
you were
really
right there.
good friends with Bill Utek and then Todd Jones and then Jeff Thormanson, who were the directors of residential field education. So I really had an understanding of what residential field education was. And then being in the city of St. Louis all those years, I knew every congregation. I was a circuit visitor, and so I knew every congregation. I knew every pastor. It was just very interesting to sort of step into that role that I somewhat knew. And then Jeff Thormanson was really great in that transition. He was happy to have someone who was paying full attention to residential field education. And that was my position. I was not doing anything else, so I was able to really focus in on residential field education.
Yeah, and for those who might not know, who are listening, resident field education is where a seminarian, typically a 4-year experience, where the third year they're sent out on a vicarage or an internship. But those first 2 years especially, they're also assigned to a local congregation, but it could also be a local ministry of some kind, right?
Most of the time it's for all deaconesses and MDiv and RAR students, it's local congregation.
Mm-hmm,
and we have 91 of them that participate. 33 of them are in Illinois. We have a couple that are the SELC district, one English district, and then the rest are Missouri district. So I work with 4 district presidents when it comes to residential field education. And it's been really great just to get to know Winkles, circuits, get to know pastors and congregations. I've done a lot of home visits, you might say, visitation. And that's been really, really powerful. I heard John Oberdeck, who used to do RFE many, many years ago, he went out on visits. And so I sort of took from him what he did and made this role more personal, where I was actually out visiting congregations and checking in, getting to know them, letting them know what RFE is, what I felt we needed to do, and maybe do some things better.
Yeah. And as we were talking in person when I was there, I don't know, a month or so ago, you talked about some really interesting and powerful ways that students can be exposed to serving in the mission of God, in addition to assisting in Sunday morning worship or assisting in a Bible class or something like that. Can you say more about some of those opportunities?
Well, academics always comes first.
Sure.
And then the pastor to be or the deaconess student, they learn, teaching the faith. They learn pastoral care. And then for the MDiv and RAR, they learn preaching, liturgy, and worship. And so all of those, they receive that training, equipping at the congregational level. But then we have these opportunities for them to go out to do modules. And that's one thing that I've developed because I knew St. Louis so well. I just looked at all the different ministries that we had out there, high schools, adult daycares, We have just wonderful ministry going on in our city of St. Louis, just a lot of things that are happening. And so I was able to plug students in so that they could catch up on maybe the DNA of some ministry, a mission, and all of them were gospel-centered, Christ-centered. So that was very important for me to make certain that the student was involved in something that was gospel and Christ-centered, but also had this element of really helping people and caring for people where they were at. So homeless ministry, just all kinds of opportunities. Even created one student this year is doing environmental science, trying to teach first article to students in schools. Have another student that's doing beekeeping.
I wonder how that started.
Yeah, right. In fact, he's going to help me out on that. And I'll put a little commercial in. There's a podcast on Tangible that David Schmidt and I do about beekeeping. That's, I think, really, really good. So,
yeah, I took in an episode of that a while back. By the way, were you involved in beekeeping before you came to St. Louis, or?
Well, I was involved in agriculture, so, and husbandry of animals and, things like that. And so that was just sort of a segue of what can I do in the city? I really didn't want chickens. I had enough with chickens, out on the farm.
Yeah.
Sheep, maybe, I don't know. But bees just it just hit home. So my wife and I became beekeepers.
Beautiful.
Urban beekeepers, by the way, too, which is really kind of a eclectic group of people. It's very popular, and it's a great way to meet new people and just have great opportunities to witness.
Yeah, hopefully not meeting them because they got stung by your bees.
Well, that's true. So far, that's been very, very good. And you just donate, you just give some honey to the neighbors, and they're very happy.
Yeah, there was a member at my parish where I served here in Florida for 20 years, and he kept bees, and he also kept me stocked in honey. So I was grateful for that. But back to the modules that you were talking about, that was something that wasn't very developed. I'll put it that way. When I was a student in the 80s, there at St. Louis Seminary. And what have you noticed as students have gotten involved in these modules? What have you noticed in terms of their development and the impact in the kingdom of God?
It's interesting because they come in and they tell me their stories and things that have happened, and I'm just so excited about hearing the things that they're seeing. It's kind of like boots on the ground. It's being there in the midst of people. It's that presence of Christ, being the presence of Christ in the community, in the neighborhood. They're able to experience that in ways that just they would never get that experience anywhere else. So St. Louis really offers, in fact, admissions is using me, enrollment, just to encourage people to come to St. Louis because of those experiences. COVID had shut a lot of that down.
Oh, yeah.
And then once we were coming out of COVID, we just started opening up new opportunities. And so there's probably maybe 30 or 40 opportunities that students have to do things outside of their congregation, sometimes connected to the congregation, but outside of the seminary walls, to get them into the city, get them into ministry, and just to help them see how ministry is presence. Ministry is engaging the neighborhood and the community, and wonderful pastors, wonderful ministry people doing this work that's very necessary among God's people here in St. Louis.
Yeah, it's so pastoral ministry in itself with the people of God in a congregation is can be very demanding, and a pastor can get so what shall I say, involved in and caring and concerned about serving the congregation that you kind of miss the opportunity to meet folks who are further away from Jesus. I'll put it.
Right.
But these things can help people, pastors, rub shoulders with those who might not know the Lord Jesus, or some of the basic Bible stories, or
Right.
even know what a Christian is like.
And we have one student that was able to do, he was in adult daycare for mentally and physically challenged adults. And here just recently, I'd shared a story with you, my own personal story, but this student had been there since September. And about December, he said, Pastor Bill, could I do that again in the spring to complete my module? And I said, well, yeah, it's cross-cultural, it's institutional, go for it. And we just had a conversation about what I had experienced at this adult daycare. And about a week later, he calls me up and he says, guess what? One of the residents passed away. And he said, very suddenly, 35 years old, and the family has asked if I would do the funeral. What an experience for this young man. And we had a professor here, Dr. Prieto, who's very involved in ministry to those who are disabled, deaf, blind. And he came alongside of this student and just was able to help him through that process. Went to him, to the visitation, the funeral, the burial, and he was able to, experience that. And it's changed his life. It's changed his life for ministry. And it's opened his eyes to see all this ministry that's out there. Every community has probably a community of adults who are disabled, mentally challenged, physically challenged, that ministry is not happening to.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like a separate congregation sometimes. And then the congregation I was involved with, Timothy, they were just very freeing and wanting the pastor to be out with his eyes open, seeing these things. And then along with that, ministry came where our school kids would come and sing. Noah Comfort Dog would come. I never wanted to be there when he was there because he was always more popular than I was. So, but that's all right. But it just so other people get involved then. And I think students are seeing that it's not up to the pastor, but it has value added to people who want to do something they don't know what to do, but then they can get out and do ministry, and that just touches people's lives with Jesus.
Yeah. I think that many of our pastoral colleagues are beginning to understand I need to have an outlet, a way, or an excuse, if you will, an avenue to get to know people. And so they get involved in, a parents group or something with the city or some other kind of caring community or whatever. And I wonder, though, if there is a missed opportunity in making a real ministry connection, or bringing other congregational members with you, or to expand those circle of relationships, and to really bring Christ into those relationships or organizations that you're involved in outside the parish. Can you speak to that and give us some guidance to make those things happen?
Sure. I always say if a ministry doesn't have legs, then I'm not going to continue to do it. And by that, I mean, if people are not coming alongside of me in the congregation, that they feel there's value in this ministry, then it's not going to happen. Example, I was doing prison ministry, going down and seeing prisoners at different prisons here around the state of Missouri, and congregation members were involved. Some of them were prayer partners. Some of them would actually go and do visitation. They would do food visits. And so I was the spiritual caregiver. I was the pastor. So I would go in and do the means of grace. I would do worship. And then the other people would be their friends. They would go in and be friends to them. And it was just unbelievable, the partnerships that people were involved in, and that people did get involved in a powerful way, and felt like they were part of the ministry. And so that became a ministry that I said, it had legs. Same way kind of with our Timothy urban beekeepers. It it didn't fall upon the pastor. It was a group of people that started the beekeeping group, and then it just expanded out to the neighborhood, to the community, to the city at large. So that's always my understanding, that you want to take people alongside. But if they see your passion, they see your excitement, you know, something they've never done before. So there's some training, equipping, but that's the pastor's role. And then people just do it on them by themselves. I mean, lots of times things happen, stories happen. I love that when I get stories back and I don't have to be involved. That's just wonderful where God is working, and, you know, people are coming to Christ. There's things happening. You know, I love to be there to do the confirmation, the catechism study, the baptisms and those sorts of things. But a lot of it happens with just regular people doing their regular life.
Yeah. So these getting involved in your community, what I hear you saying is not a solo act.
No.
And so I'm imagining that there needs to be an intentional effort to invite somebody along with you who might their eyes might light up if they hear you saying that you've done this. And so you say, hey, come along with me. And then along the way in the windshield time, you can talk about it and debrief what happened. And before you know it, they have a relationship with somebody, and they maybe bring a friend and who might not even be a member any place, but it's a friend of theirs. And through that ministry opportunity, or that getting involved in something in the community, they're finding themselves talking about the blessings of our Lord and Savior. And before too long, people are confessing faith in him.
Yeah, and one thing that probably comes up more often is, you know, would your community of faith or your church pray for me because of this situation? And that's probably one of the biggest connectors, is the prayer. And then once that happens, you know, praying in Jesus' name, and then there's opportunities to even share even more. But it does it, and I believe God has given me some a wisdom, discernment, so that I can pick the right people. I miss it once in a while, but just to choose people, and not just one person. You know, pick, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And sometimes we've limited cross-cultural ministry to just ethnic ministry, where we have so many groups of people out there that are outside of our own culture.
Yeah.
And how do we then, you know, learn about their culture, learn from them, but also then become friends with them? How do we not have a preconceived notion or understanding of what we want to do, or a judgment? And that's training, that's teaching, where the pastor, and like you said, Scott, it's intentional. You have to be intentional about it.
Yeah. And so through those relationships, you're not sort of hiding the fact that you're a person of faith, but you're saying, this is who I am. I'm a child of God by, you know, I'm baptized into Christ. And then
It's an
through
identity. Yeah, and it's not a bait and switch. I always tell people it's not a bait and switch. We're not into that. And there's probably, I think I might have said this to you, but there are probably at Timothy, with Pastor Rawl and myself and the other ministry team, probably 1,000 people that we ministered to, that I would call them members of Timothy Lutheran Church, that never were on our roster, never were on our, never were reported to the synod as being part of our congregation. But that was through different people, knowing different people, connecting with different people. And it just kept expanding and kept expanding and expanding.
And then through those relationships where they know who you are, you're saying that along the way they'll say, hey, such and such is happening. Could you and your church pray for me? And
Yes.
that allows you to go deeper. And then the next time you see them, hey, you can ask them about it because they asked you to pray. And before you know it, they might be at a worship service, or they might be,
It might be.
praying with you, or maybe they'll go back to their church that they grew up in.
Or they might call you for a hospital visit, or they might call you for something. I had to walk by a basketball court one day on a park, and some young Ethiopian boy hollered out to me, "Pastor Bill." I mean, I had not seen this young man for 8 years probably, and he'd grown up quite a little bit. But it was just one of those moments, and we talked about how we had met, how it was through someone else who we had come to know each other, but he knew me as Pastor Bill. So he was able to share with me how his family was doing, how he was doing, brothers and sisters, and just a reconnecting. And it's sort of like that's what it'll be like in heaven, reconnecting with all of these people, and just how God places you in certain places at certain times, or just give you wonderful opportunities.
Oh, what a thrill. And he called you out after all those years.
He called me Pastor Bill, yeah. Yeah, after all those years, but that's how he knew me, and that's how most people in the community know me as Pastor Bill. I was Vicar Wilson. This is how this all transitioned, see?
Okay.
And when I became pastor, it wasn't going to be Pastor Wilson because they were always going to call me Vicar Wilson. So I said, let's change it to Pastor Bill. And so that just caught on, and it just went out into the community, the neighborhood, and just really gave us just wonderful opportunities.
As you talk about that circle expanding, I'm reminded of what another pastor said just a few days ago at our circuit meeting. And he said, I'm always encouraging members with their friends to circle in, that those friends are invited to come over to a church member's house or an activity that we're doing. And before too long, they're involved in a prayer, they're involved in a devotion, they're involved in a conversation about faith, and maybe they end up at Easter service or whatever. But, there's that expanding of relationships. And then he talked about circling them in,
I like
and that welcoming spirit. And he said, we make this evangelism thing too hard. It's not,
It's not a program. It will not work as a program. It has to be very natural. It has to be right from the heart and what people are interested in. That's why I said we would try some things like men's groups and things like that. Then it'll always fall back on the pastor to have it organized. And I'd say, nope, not going to do it. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
And the things that were a blessing to many, many people, not only the congregation, but outside the four walls, were the things that happened naturally, just in a natural way in which people were introduced to each other, got to know one another, mothers groups, whatever. It just happened in a very natural way.
What you just said was so fascinating and probably freeing for pastors to hear, that you can say no to things if you realize that your stewardship just isn't working.
Right.
If you're constantly putting your shoulder to the wheel to make the machinery keep going, it's probably not where you want to go. However, if it's building relationships and inviting people to get involved in this thing that's taking off because of God's blessing, well, now we're getting somewhere. Am I on the right track?
You're right on. And that's what the students have been finding out. They're seeing really how they take everything they're learning at the seminary, all the academics, the systematics, exegetical, the practical, and the historical, and then how that applies then in the church, how that applies in ministry. So they're seeing the fruit of everything they're learning, but how does that go out then to, the neighborhood, into the community? How does it go out when they're preaching and Bible studies, but then how do they equip people then to move out? And so they're seeing how it's happened in the past and how we have great theology and we have the greatest doctrine, the means of grace. So the pastor doesn't have to be there 24/7. You deliver the goods, God's at work. The Holy Spirit works faith in those that he's going to work faith in. But to have that first initial conversation is equipping people, and just to do it in a very natural way. And so students are learning that. And that's where I believe I'm hearing the greatest stories when they come back, whether it's at a nursing home, at a high school, whether it's at, St. Mary's Hospital. We have some students working with the Southern Illinois District doing prison ministry. They're just learning so much. And it's just, and it's every community has, wherever they'll be called to, has some group of people or some neighborhood community or people's group that are probably not being reached.
Absolutely.
And to have your eyes open for that.
And there's a truism that I've been repeating more and more often lately, which is you can't replicate what you haven't experienced.
Right.
And so with the resident field education modules and other experiences, and with lay people getting involved in these things, they're experiencing it. And so they can be more likely than to repeat that pattern in the parish where they get a call if they're a pastor, or to initiate some other thing if they're a lay person at a congregation, because they've seen it with their own eyes, and the value of the just being a good friend and listening and being sensitive to helping and praying and modeling care for one another that maybe the non-members in the group that you're with happen to witness. Did you see how they loved one another?
And they're not only seeing that, but they're also networking. They're establishing resources so that when they do get out in the parish, they have people they can call.
Yeah.
And they can say, hey, I know what you did. Now I have this idea. What do you think? So
there you go.
It's not so much someone telling them what to do, but it's coming alongside and, just because not every ministry is the same, but there are things that can be replicated. I'm working with some students that are at a Lindenwood area senior ministry. So it's a neighborhood of 5 churches. One is Lutheran, very ecumenical, but the role of the ministry is to serve the seniors. So they have Stephen ministry, they have social events, they have rides, they have Saturday servants where they go and do things, but it's a couple social workers that are working it. So students are able to see this could be replicated.
Yeah.
And it can be replicated in a lot of ministries, that we can be a little more ecumenical. We can have others who are believers in Jesus come alongside of us and be with us. And so students are seeing that. And so it's opening their minds to ideas, and our students are great. I mean, they have this creativity. We just can't squelch that creativity into one little kind of square. It has to be free. I preached in the chapel last week, and I said that, with the 10 Commandments, it's not that God's putting us in a box. He's disturbing us to be outside the box.
Oh,
to be
there you go.
Yeah. And that happens in everyday life. And people see that, and then they'll ask the question, why are you doing what you're doing? Well, what an opportunity. Because God, the Creator, has given me life. He's identified me as a child of God and brought me into his family through baptism. So, people just see that this is just an opportunity.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, you hinted at the next direction that I wanted to go in, which is this thing called coaching. And I know we've talked about that, which is really kind of how we got introduced in the first place. But can you share a little bit of your history of how you got introduced to coaching, and
Sure.
how you see it, that it can be used in ministry?
Well, when I was in business, I had a lot of ideas. I always tell people I have this futuristic mind that sort of sees how things are going to be in the future and what we need to do today to make things happen. And so I worked with Iowa State University, and they had, in those days, coaching was a little bit different than it is today. But it wasn't mentoring. It wasn't giving me the answers. It was more coming alongside with a different set of eyes, some insight, and some knowledge that perhaps I didn't have, or directed me and pointed me in a different direction. And so it was through some of that. Even that's kind of how I got to the ministry. through the coach, a secular coach,
Okay.
to come to St. Louis and to be in ministry. And then just the opportunities that I've had with the Missouri district, they've always been very pro coaching. And so working with a coach in ministry, not waiting until I was burned out or waiting until I was, at my wit's end what to do. And so it just helped juice the creativity within me and give me the freedom to do things. And so when I arrived at the seminary, we started a program, Urban Ministry Experience, and we started working with a coaching partnership that Bill Geis helped us put together. And again, like I said, the probably the stone wall always in our Lutheran community is that the coaches are not Lutheran. So we ended that, but I could see that there was something necessary at the seminary where there had to be some education.
Yeah.
Because we used to call RFE supervisors coaches, mentor/coaches. And I removed that terminology because they're not coaches. They're not trained to be coaches. They are, and even the faculty here sometimes think they're coaches. They're not coaches because a lot of times we're telling the students what to do. And so I'm really passionate about introducing coaching to seminarians and also first-year students. So when they get out, they understand what coaching is. If nothing else, they have an educated mind on coaching.
Yeah.
And they see how choosing a coach is for not just telling them what to do, but allowing those creative juices to really be free to do, ministry and to have someone come alongside with some knowledge, insight, and like I said, another set of eyes. And that's where I believe it's so powerful to just be able to use the ministry people that we have that just are just wonderful, like I said, just wonderful people, and just allow them to go with these ideas and not to get caught up in it has to be this way or that way. And a coach can do that.
Yeah. I so appreciate what you're saying. And as a coach myself and working with the LCMS Coaching Network, which is pretty new, we're trying to help people understand that coaching is, like you say, it is not telling you what to do, but helping you to change through another process, helping you to grow, helping you to be a good steward of the gifts that God has given you. And there's this sense that if I get a coach, that means that I'm a problem or that I need help or I'm one or two steps down and that it's a remedial thing.
Sure.
It can be, but that's not its primary purpose.
Right.
And so, coaching is such a way to think future-oriented, think possibilities, think outside of your normal train of thought, where we can kind of get stuck and be limited. What other things have you experienced or seen in coaching?
Well, the students that received the coaching have really, they appreciated it, not only for just getting started, but just sort of helping their balance of life, helping them normalize this new surrounding, help them with balancing family, ministry, academics, all of the things that go in. So transitional coaching, I guess I would call a little bit.
Sure.
But again, not telling them what to do, but giving them goals, setting goals, and then keeping them accountable to what they said they were going to do. That was probably the most powerful that I saw with first-year students that received it. And then just, again, helping them grow in their opportunities that were before them and how they could best take advantage of the seminary, not only the academics, but the experiences. And like, I believe what you said, Scott, to be able to see some things maybe that they had never seen before, to take the risk. And this is a great place to do that, to take the risk and try something. And you never know. Prison ministry was not on my radar at all. I mean, not at all. And I received that opportunity, and it just opened doors, and, it just made things happen that never would have happened, had not a coach sort of said, try it.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with trying, and there's nothing wrong with failing.
Yeah. There's a lesson both
I've
ways.
failed so many times in my life, but it's the joy of those successes. And again, the eternal value that you are bringing to people's lives, that just, gets you up every morning, the desire to do, what's God got in mind today, who you're going to find, who you're going to visit at the grocery store I think I told you the story about going to a paint store. My wife and I weren't planning to go to the paint store, this one, but we somehow got redirected and met a gal there, and I had my shirt on. How can I pray for you today? And, she just goes, I like your shirt. And I said, well, how can I pray for you today? She had lost some family members, and, she was just, and her name was Symphony.
How about that?
And so, and the students are seeing when they're out and about, they have these opportunities. And so the four walls aren't keeping, they just can't wait to get their sermon done or get their Bible study done so they can get out, because they know that's where they're going to meet. And that's where a coach can come alongside and really, yes, or you ask them the question, did you get outside? Did you walk the neighborhood this week? Did you, just depending on what they wanted, what their goals are and stuff like that. But
sure.
I think because we now have the LCMS coaching, that sort of knocks down the wall of non-Lutheran coaching. So that should not be an issue anymore.
And when you have that commonality of faith and confession, so you've got those same assumptions, but you're also seeking God's will for possibilities. What am I missing, Lord? What do you have? Where have you been working and maybe plowing ground that I need to sow the seeds of the gospel? And so as you think those things through with a coach, with somebody who helps you to think possibilities, boy, amazing things can happen.
Yeah, I think, God disturbs our minds to see opportunities, but we always have that limiting factor, and it's time. And that's where a coach can come alongside. And I believe there's free time available that we don't realize. And, a coach can be very helpful with that.
I tell potential clients, they say, I just don't have time for a coach right now. And I say, sounds like you need a coach.
Yes. That's probably the one challenge that seminarians have every day. They don't have enough time to read every book, to do everything they need to do, every assignment, and then to do RFE on top of that, to do, to be out and about, balance. They don't have time. Well, that's a problem. Exactly.
Well, I really appreciate your time today. And do you have any kind of concluding thoughts or encouragement for our listeners as we draw our time to a conclusion?
Well, I believe the blessings that God gives to us as we I always say things kind of funnel down into Good Friday. And then that's the last day. That's the final judgment. And then we have that opening of the tomb that opens us up and frees us up to do everything that God gives us to do while we have life here on this earth, and to take advantage of every opportunity. My wife and I, when we leave for the morning, we make the sign of the cross on each other, that you are a baptized child of God. And what does that mean to me? It means, wow, open my eyes, Lord, give me, and sometimes I'll say, I'll see something and I'll say, I really don't have time for that. And Brenda will go, what? You don't have time? And so, to have someone keep you accountable, I believe, and just, we have so many creative ideas, and they're great ideas that just never get an opportunity to get off the ground, because and that's where I believe coaching could really be helpful. And it would just do things in ministry that we would never, ever, God will just do things that we'll never, ever expect.
Yeah. And that's what staves off all that burnout. You see God's hand at work, and the person who hears the gospel for the first time, uh, professes their faith for the first time, and experiences the waters of baptism and God's grace. Oh, I can do this again tomorrow.
Well, I'm
What?
71, and so I still have this fire within me for this next ministry. Now, I do go home at nights and take a nap sometimes. I do have to sit in the chair. My wife will tell you, Brenda will say, so I don't have quite the energy I used to have, but I still have in my mind still tells me, man, this is a great opportunity for ministry, and get to know this person, do something, so.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you so much for saying that about making the sign of the cross on your spouse. That's just gold right there. Well, how can people get in touch with you if they want to continue the conversation at some level?
Well, I would say I'll give you my regular email address, because on July 1st, my RFE experience as interim is going to end.
Okay.
And so I'm going to be taking up something new on July 1st. I've been working on that, and I have about 3 offers that I'm looking at. So pray for that I choose the right one. But it's P as in Paul, S as in Sam, T as in Tom, O as in Orange, R as in Roger, 123 @gmail.com.
So it's PSTOR123 @gmail.com. So you can get a hold of Pastor Bill.
Exactly, without the A.
Well, thank you so much, Bill. It's been a real blessing to chat with you and to get to know you.
Well, I would say, I've known you for quite some time here at the seminary. I've heard just wonderful things from Tim Seleska, and I know what you've done with SMP. And so it was my privilege last year when we were able to meet. I just really was tickled to meet you. And now this friendship that we have it's just great. So
Oh,
thank you.
you're kind, and you're a blessing to us and to the church. Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Bill, and thank you for listening. I'd love to come alongside you and support your leadership and ministry journey as a coach. And you can find me at scottgress.com or email me at scottgress@me.com. And be sure to check out the LCMS Coaching Network at lcmscoaching.com. And God bless your leadership. And we'll see you next time on The Coaching Leader.